No beating around the bush here, people. I fucking hated this film. I hated this film. This film is quite possibly one of the worst films I've ever seen in my life. There are so many problems with this film that I have no clue as to where to begin. I guess I'll start with the plot. Well, what is the plot? Well, basically, it's about this random guy who we don't know anything about getting executed. This is the first problem with this film. This film doesn't explain anything. One of the worst things you can do as a writer is to throw your audience into a situation without giving them any backstory, without explaining what's happening or why it's happening. This film doesn't do that. From the very beginning, we are thrown into this situation without being given any background information. We're not told who this guy is, what's happening, or why it's happening. You know how a lot of times when a film is based on a book, you can enjoy the film without having to read the book? Not so with this movie. Unlike the Harry Potter series or the Lord of the Rings, you can't enjoy this film if you haven't read the book it's based on. If you haven't read the book this film is based on, then like me, you're going to be confused as fuck. It's like the writers and director just said, okay, let's make a movie about Christianity, but let's not bother giving any backstory information to the audience since the majority of people who will already know the story. Well, I hate to break it to you, Mel Gibson, but not everybody knows the story. Not every one of us grew up with the story. For those of us who didn't, we need more information before going to see this film, and a lot of us don't have the time or the patience to sit down and read the entire story. And because of that, this only makes this movie even more confusing. I'm not kidding. This film has got to be the most confusing film I've ever seen. Why? Once again, the film doesn't explain anything to us. We don't know any of the characters' names or what their background is. This is extremely bad when we don't know anything about the protagonist. We see this man being beaten and tortured, but we the audience don't give a shit because we don't know anything about him or why this should matter to us. Not only is this film confusing, but it's boring. Nothing happens in this film. Nothing. When I say nothing happens in this film, what I mean is that nothing adventurous happens. This is basically what happens. We have a scene where people do nothing but talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Then we have a scene where this man gets the shit beaten out of him. Then we cut to another scene where people talk some more. This film is so repetitive that it's just a total bore to watch. It would be nice if the dialogue in this film actually gave us some information about what's going on, but no, we just get the same information multiple times. I don't know how many times Baldy here said the line, "I find no reason to kill him." The little information that was given to us during the trial scene is repeated at least twice if I'm counting correctly. As I said, we are not given any information about the characters in this film. This character might as well be fucking Voldemort, or hell, he could be the fucking Emperor from Star Wars for all I care. That's as good as a guess as any since the film doesn't tell us who this guy is. What about this guy? Hell, he might as well be Will from Pirates of the Caribbean. Like the first guy, the two of them look alike. Hell, for the longest time, I thought this woman was the protagonist's wife. What makes this even worse is that most of the characters don't do anything. All they do is stand around. No, I'm not kidding. That's really all they do throughout the entire film. Why even bother having them in the film? If you're going to go to the trouble of creating a character for your story, have that character do something that drives the story forward or contributes at least something to the story. That's another problem with the dialogue. The dialogue does nothing to drive the story forward. All the dialogue is a constant repeat of the same information over and over and over again. This is one thing that you're taught very early on as a writer. If the dialogue doesn't drive the story forward or doesn't contribute to the story, then the dialogue isn't needed and should automatically be thrown out. And don't get me started on the violence. This film shouldn't have been rated R. It should have been rated NC-17. I don't care how old a person is, no one under the age of 17 should see this film. This film is overly violent in that it's just violent for the sake of being violent. There's no point into it whatsoever. It's like Mel Gibson said, okay, Let's make this next scene as gory, as bloody, as violent as possible. If all the violent, gory scenes had been taken out, this film probably could have been given a PG rating like other films based on this story. No, they couldn't possibly do that. They had to make this film as gory and violent as possible, just because they could. But is there anything I liked about this movie? Shockingly, yes, there are some positive aspects to this film. The music for the most part is spectacular. I loved the music in this film. Well done, John Debney. The acting is also very well done, but it's ruined by the fact that we don't give two shits about any of his characters. The cinematography was well done. This makes it so that we, the audience, get to see every violent, gory, bloody bit up close and personal. Word of warning, don't see this film if you have a weak stomach. This film could have been great, really something, but it was ultimately ruined by the horrible dialogue, the extreme violence, and the lack of information. This is a film that I will not be looking forward to watching twice. Once was enough for me. Seeing this film was plenty. I do not want to see this film ever again. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would much rather watch a shitty film based on a cartoon like Scooby-Doo or Alvin and the Chipmunks and watch this piss poor excuse for a film. If I could do so, I would go back in time in order to stop this film from being made. But since I can't do that, I'm stuck wishing that this film had never been made. It's a sad world we live in when something like this gets distributed. Well, that's it for me. I'm going to go scrub my brain to see if I can't rid it of this piece of shit film. Good night, everybody.